Hello, this is Unexplained America, and I'm your host, Lisa. And thank you for tuning in this week for this special episode. Now, I just had my live show. It was a wonderful time, big success for me and my friends Cody and Elaine with Cryptids Across the Atlas. But what I covered in that show was the Abe Pipkin case, which I am going to cover for you now because I did have to abbreviate the case for the show and there was a lot more information to share. So this will be a part 2 series on Abe Pipkin. So this is part 1. Now, a little business. Thank you again. Shout out to my OG listeners that showed up in Malvern at the Ritz Theater. So, I love you guys. You know who you are. Really enjoyed seeing you guys. Heath and Henry, I had not seen you in person, so that was awesome. We have been friends through this podcast journey for since we began. And I'm just so thankful that you guys showed up. And then there were so many more and new faces and just the Malvern community, my friends and family. Yeah. Thank you. Big shout out, big love, Amber and Sherry, just big shout out. And it was just a huge success. A big shout out again to Heather and Madison with ASU Three Rivers. So just super success. But please go follow me. And this is my 134th episode, guys. So 133 other episodes to catch up on, listen to, but go find my Facebook business page. So you guys know I have a big group following on Facebook, but I really want to transition to the business page. So go find the business page, follow the business page. Now, so we're going to get started on Abe Pipkin's case from 1977. Now, this is a super sad deal. This is a very homegrown case for me because it happened in a city that's only like 15 miles or less from where I live. I had, from the very beginning of having the podcast, this case has been brought up in numerous places. It's just a very sad deal. It was a cold case, but it was solved. And so we're going to get into all the ins and outs. But now, in the early morning hours of Tuesday, April 5th, 71-year-old Abe Pipkin was bludgeoned to death in his head with a blunt instrument. He would die en route to the hospital. His family, the community, the state, they all wanted justice and answers, but it would take 25 years before that would happen. So, a little background about Abe. Abe, at this time, he has a wife, Flossie. He had been married to Flossie since 1925. Abe was born in 1905. He had grown up in Arkansas, in and around the White County area. And this, where he was living in 1977, the city is Beebe, and he kind of lived in the outskirts of Beebe. Now, Abe and Flossie would have 4 sons and 1 daughter. One of their sons was just a little baby. His name was Gerald when he died, and he passed away as a little baby. But he would have Bobby, Billy, and Guy, and then, like I said, his daughter Ivy. Now, I mentioned that Abe grew up in Arkansas. He was homegrown. He worked in farming and fishing all throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Okay. Now, at the time in 1977, Abe had been working as a night patrolman for the city of Beebe, Arkansas. A little background about Beebe. I told you it's very close to where I live, and I actually met my husband in Beebe going to the ASU, like the Arkansas State University branch there in Beebe. So Beebe has my heart. And then I had a great Aunt Cordy that lived in Beebe. So I spent a lot of time in Beebe from the time I was growing up. Now, Beebe is a small town. At the time of this happening in 1977, Beebe's population was 3,000, and that's the city. Currently, their population is 9,000. And this is kind of in White County, central Arkansas. Beebe had a horrific tragedy in the town in 1999. Actually, my husband was living there in Beebe at this time, but they were hit with just a terrible tornadic activity. Tornadoes hit the town, like demolished the gym that he had been playing basketball in just like hours before. But this happened in January of 1999, but this was a horrendous situation for Beebe. They also, if you also need to check out our blackbirds. We have an episode I'll kind of tag in this, but the blackbirds of Beebe was where this happened. So just a lot going on in Beebe, but Beebe's just a small town. It's a safe town. And I wouldn't say it has zero crime, but the crime rate is super low. I would consider that definitely like what they call a bedroom community. People probably commute a lot to work, but there's schools, there's banks, there's churches, there's shopping. Currently, Beebe actually has a 7 Brew and a super Walmart. So they are a really happening place to be. Now, Abe at this time, he had actually worked his total time with the city of Beebe was about 18 months as like an officer. But at this time, he had been back to work for the city of Beebe for about 8 months, is what I'm understanding. Now, his shift for the city of Beebe was 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. and he worked 6 days a week. And remember, he's 71 years old. He's retired. He's on Social Security, but he enjoyed this work. And evidently he was a night owl and could handle this. I probably could do it too, actually. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, I probably could. On April 5th at approximately 4 a.m., Abe is working. He is walking around. This is the downtown streets of Beebe. And really, like, his main job was a city watchman. He could not arrest people. Like, he could detain them for sure, but he was told to not pull people over for traffic violations. Like, really, his job was just to shake the business stores, make sure no one was stealing anything overnight. And he was the only officer working between that shift. So basically, he was watching while the officers got their rest. And I mean, this is a small town. Their officer base, they had a dispatcher, which we'll get into, but they didn't have a lot of staff. So he provided this service to the city. And because of his age, they couldn't give him like a patrol car. He drove his own vehicle. They paid him for like mileage. And Abe also did not have an officer's uniform per se, but he had a uniform. He had a badge of his own. On the night, we'll kind of talk about this, he was not wearing his badge, but he did also carry his own gun. It's kind of like he is an officer, but it's just a little bit different from the regular officers on duty. Now, I mentioned around 4 a.m., Abe was walking around. He had actually spoken to the dispatcher, Fred, at around 4. Now, around 4:33 a.m., there is a newspaper delivery guy, and he's working for the Arkansas Gazette, and his name is David Lytle. Little. Now, he is a young man. He is also a student at the ASU Beebe campus there, and he lives in Beebe, but he is delivering newspapers, and he is running late. Like, he normally wakes up at 3:30, then he starts his delivery, and he has a certain route that he takes, but he was running late, so he didn't actually start his route until like 4 a.m. Again, this is 4:33-ish a.m. He sees Abe, and he's driving his route, so he's in the downtown area of Beebe, and he sees Abe leaning against a building. And this isn't abnormal, him seeing Abe. Of course, Abe works 6 days a week, and David delivers these papers, but he sees Abe, and he is kind of worried because, not worried, but Abe isn't wearing his hat. Abe is normally in a hat, but he was not. And Abe is kind of on Center Street, which is coming up to Main Street of the downtown area. And as he's approaching Abe, because he's driving and Abe is on the street, like as he gets closer, Abe kind of steps into the light. He calls it a vapor light, but like a street light. And as this happens, David is able to see blood all over Abe's face. This immediately scares David. He is totally freaked out. David tries to go, like, he doesn't try to get out of his car and help it. He's just totally scared. He doesn't know what's going on. David goes directly to the police station, which is right there downtown. But Nobody's there. So David runs home, and then he calls the police chief, whose name is James Jackson. And all he says to James is, there is something wrong with Abe. Again, this is probably like 4:37, 4:40 by this time. The chief calls the dispatcher. Again, he's Fred Harrell. And Fred mentions that, hey, I'd seen Abe at 4, so he didn't know, and he appeared fine, like he was fine at 4 o'clock. Now, the chief drives into town where David had said, and David actually meets the chief. So David had gotten back in his car, meets the chief where he had told him, and they find Abe. So Abe is, at this point, he is on the corner of Highway 31 and Highway 67. This was like by the railroad tracks. So when you're downtown, currently in Beebe, it's like right there by the train depot where you're crossing 31 and 67. I should say the old 67. They see Abe. They get out of the car. They rush to Abe. Chief Jackson finds Abe hurt. He is conscious, but he is not coherent. He is not talking. He tries to radio Fred to get the doctor, Dr. Short. Well, Dr. Short asked them to bring Abe to his clinic. Well, the chief is trying to get Abe into his car, and David's trying to help the chief. Well, they cannot. Finally, David and the chief are able to get Abe to the police station. And again, Abe is not talking. He is moaning. He is in pain. He is not coherent. They get him to the police station. They lay him down on the floor. They put some towels under his head. And again, there is blood everywhere. And I don't know if you've ever had a cut on your head or whatever, but there was a lot of blood. Dr. Short, realizing, they phone him because they're like, hey, we're not getting Abe anywhere. He comes to the police station, and upon seeing him, he is in serious trouble here. So Dr. Short tells the police to get the ambulance there, that Abe needs to go immediately to Little Rock to the hospital just as soon as possible. He's in a very seriously wounded to his head. Now, Dr. Short is working on Abe. Like, he's cleaning him up. He's bandaging his head. He's doing everything he can. Now, during this time, Abe stops breathing, okay? And I can't tell you exact time of this, but this is, I would say, between 4:45 and probably 5:30, okay? But Abe does stop breathing, but the paramedics arrive and they give Dr. Short this artificial respirator to help revive Abe, and they do get Abe breathing again. So they load Abe into the ambulance and they're heading to Little Rock. And Little Rock's probably, I would say, 30 miles south of Beebe on the highway. Okay, just to kind of give you some framework there. 10 minutes into this route, the ambulance had loaded up Abe. They radio back to the station and state that Abe's heart has stopped and that he's no longer breathing. So Dr. Short just asked that they bring Abe back to the police department, and then once he arrives, Dr. Short pronounces Abe as dead. In that time frame, so Abe is there, Dr. Short is there, of course the chief is there. David had gone on, David had left, he was doing his newspaper bit. Fred's there. The chief, upon inspecting Abe, he can tell that Abe does not have his badge on, and they will find that Abe had left it at home. Flossie will confirm that. But he does pat Abe down because he knows he carries his .38 Smith & Wesson special gun. And he does note that Abe does not have his gun. So something's happened to the gun, whether it's whatever, but they need to find the gun. So sadly, Abe is gone, and he has been murdered. The autopsy will reveal that Abe sustained 12 to 14 brutal strikes with a blunt object directly to his skull. Immediately upon this, obviously, Abe's body is taken for autopsy. The Beebe Police Department, of course, they're immediately looking downtown, and they find that a Dotson's Pharmacy, which is located at 110 Main Street, that the front door window was busted out. So there was clearly the place where this whole horrific crime had happened. And by this time it's daylight, they can start actually inspect. And then the police department's also finding blood spots. There's just drips. There's just a line of where Abe had been. There's blood drips and drops at all these different downtown locations and around the pharmacy. Beebe Police Department, we talked about how small a town this is. They immediately call in backup help from the Arkansas State Police and also the White County Sheriff's Office. All of these three divisions are immediately investigating this obvious crime scene. Upon investigation inside Dotson's, they find drawers pulled out, glass shattered from the door. They find all kinds of items inside the pharmacy in total disarray. It is very obvious that someone broke into the pharmacy, went through it, taking things, knocking things over. It was just a total, absolute mess inside the pharmacy. The pharmacy, people are showing up for work like they would normally. And they're coming in, and Joe Hudson, he is the pharmacist, and they will interview him and then the owners of the pharmacy and all of the pharmacy techs and clerks just to talk about what they had seen the day before, if anything had been weird. Joe will confirm that he had come into work at 6:30 a.m. and he finds police are investigating. He finds out what happened, and he will be able to assist the police in an inventory of what is missing, because they had actually gotten a shipment the day before, but it wasn't even like unpacked and such, that he was able to fully outline what all was missing. The items missing was a 4cc bottle of Valium, and it was valued at $6. There was 150 tablets of 5 milligram Valium missing, valued at $12. 300 tablets of 10 milligrams of Valium missing, valued at $28. There were 6 4-ounce elixir terpene hydrolate syrups with coating missing. These were valued at $6. There was a 1 pint bottle of Demerol and then a 1 to 2 ounce Demerol that were missing, that were valued at $18. And then there was a 1 pint bottle of dophylline hydrochloride missing, and that was $6. We're talking the total items missing totaled $76. Not even $100 of missing inventory. The worth of that today is $350 of items missing. Of course, I don't know the street value, quote unquote, of what this person would have sold these items for on the street, but literally Abe Pipkin's life was worth less than $100 of stolen items. It's just absolutely insane to think about. And of course, and this whole thing, again, Beebe is a small town. This was absolutely horrific. This was immediately news across the city, the state, the county. This was just shocking, absolutely shocking for this small community. Immediately, the Arkansas State Police, they are immediately investigating. They're interviewing any known persons, people connected to burglaries and drugs, and we'll get into some of the actual interviews, but there were literally 300 to 400 plus people interviewed within this time frame, just trying to get answers. There will be suspects emerge kind of early and then later on that we'll get into, but they are questioned. No one is arrested, but again, we will look at actual suspects and who, what, where, and why. Okay. When they are processing the crime scene, and again, this is 1977, they don't know anything about DNA. Kind of the big evidence, I guess, as far as identifying, of course, they're collecting evidence, of course, but there's blood and then there's fingerprints. Fingerprint evidence is kind of huge as far as matching people. But I'm going to go through, and there was tons of evidence taken, but some of the evidence that was collected. So there was a 12-ounce Schlitz beer can left at the scene. It was found near the pharmacy on the sidewalk. There was a brown medicine bottle. It was covered in what appeared to be blood and hair. It was also found like right outside the pharmacy. There were a pair of broken eyeglasses, thought that they might be either the perpetrator's or Abe's glasses. There was a brown vanilla envelope that was also covered in what appeared to be blood. There was a sample of what appeared to be blood on a wall kind of close to where Abe was standing when David saw him. So it was kind of like a mark that would have been around 6 feet, between 5 and 6 feet off the ground, like a head height of Abe. They collect a soil sample, and then they collect all the shattered glass that was from the pharmacy door. They collect several more blood samples, and these are at various different locations around the sidewalks in downtown. And I will post, so there is like a crime scene photo, and I actually have a video where I went there, but a lot of it either appears that Abe went through the pharmacy, like out the back door of the pharmacy. There was kind of like an alley there, or he went round to the side of the set of buildings, and then to the back, because there was a lot of physical evidence like blood and such behind Dotson's pharmacy, behind the kind of row, because it was Dotson's and then 3 other buildings around it, like kind of in a row. And then this was also behind the Beebe News, which is actually still there today. Just a lot of evidence behind. Now they collect a brown billed hat thought to be Abe's. So that would have been the hat that was missing, that Dave was like, hey, Abe doesn't have his hat on. They collected a blue box that held what was thought to be Abe's gun, his Smith & Wesson. They collected several hairs and fibers in the pharmacy and along the downtown streets and pavement. They do collect a Salem cigarette. This butt was found near the beer cans. And there were like not just one beer can, there was like 3. So they collected all 3. Now they collect all of Abe's clothing that he was wearing at the time, which was his police jacket. He had a pair of green pants on. He had a thermal underwear top and a pair of suspenders, and they collect all of that. They do collect 17 sets of latent fingerprints from the pharmacy. And then they collect a set of tire impressions. They take pictures of these tire impressions, footprint impressions, like an actual footprint, and then shoe impressions. So they are collecting all of this. And of course, they're taking tons of photographs of the crime scene. And I do have photographs from the case file, and I will be posting those for you guys. Now, we're talking right away, day after. Of course, the Arkansas State Police, the investigators working the file, they are again chasing any and all leads, looking at hundreds of names being thrown out. There are tons of names being discussed of known people in town that were either doing drugs or selling drugs, mostly marijuana mentioned, or what they call dope. And all of these people in the town, and then the people that they're pointing to, they're all pointing fingers at everyone else. Again, we're gonna get into this, and the investigators were also going to get into this. So the investigators are looking at all these known people, and of course they're having to look at known people that burglarizing places, burglarizing businesses, pharmacies especially, and that was a huge deal at that time. I will say there were many burglaries of pharmacies coming about. So, and of course it's in a time frame where it didn't have all the sophisticated lockdowns and security cameras. Of course, if this happened nowadays, just in downtown Beebe, I'm sure there were tons of cameras now. And of course, people have their digital footprints. So anyway, just a totally different time and place going on. Now, they also have to look at everyone in Abe's life, which we will get into. But right away, some names are coming about, okay? And I'm not going to name people's full names. They were suspects. They were looked at, but there's no reason to name their full name unless there is. So James Douglas, he is arrested actually for a felony in Newport News, Virginia. And so someone had alluded to him that he had been around the Beebe area. They knew that he was kind of always getting in trouble. So he is a suspect right away. The Arkansas State Police reach out to the Newport News, Virginia, because they want to see his fingerprints. So they know he's been arrested. And again, this is like a time frame where these policemen are having to work really hard. There's not like a database, there's not the computer systems or anything like that. So they're just having to chase down these leads, and they're mailing actual letters. So they mail a letter to the Newport News Police Department to request information about this James Douglas and get copies of his fingerprints. So they do, and they are eventually able to rule him out. Now there is a person that pops up on their radar, and by coincidence, his nickname is Radar. So his name is Ricky Joe H. He goes by Radar. They actually give him a polygraph. So he is questioned, he is polygraphed, he does pass his polygraph at this time, and this is right away. And they had gotten his name because he had a history of burglaries. Now there is a Larry C, and this is interesting. So Larry C comes up as a suspect kind of multiple times throughout the years. There is a person that names a kid named Mike. So Mike's a juvenile. He has a brother named Clayton who's just like this horrible person, evidently. Well, Mike states that Larry is involved in another murder, so that he is letting police know, and others are letting police know actually, that this Larry was guilty in the clubbing death of a man named Monroe Maples that happened in 1972. And kind of a side note, I will look at that just to kind of see if that was even true or if it was just alleged or suspected. But this Larry C, people were talking about that, multiple people, not just this Mike juvenile or whatever. And Clayton is looked at too. So Mike's, I think it's his brother, Mike, is looked at. A woman named Melissa she is interviewed and she corroborates Mike's story about Larry and about his involvement in this Monroe person's death. Larry is notated by Mike, but Mike also notates a guy named Truman W. And Truman, I will say, comes up multiple times. And it's so weird. Larry, a guy with his last name, and then the Truman with his last name, they pop up over and over and over. And I can't tell if they're like people just have their first names wrong, or if they're just, I don't know, or if there's actually like more. They are popping up and by multiple people over and over in the case file. Now, evidently, this Truman, he hangs out with a bunch of other drug pushers and a set of brothers known as Larry and Gary. There's a lot of, and a different Larry. So there are a lot of Larrys and a lot of Garys, but evidently these brothers were notorious and really bad dudes that did a lot of bad things. Another set of suspects that popped up was a Gary L, a different Gary's, and then a Glenn M. And they are also known to be local drug dealers there in the Beebe area. And a lot of these people are in what's called like the Lonoke County. So Beebe is very close to Lonoke and Lonoke County, and then the city of Cabot. So a lot of these people are either Beebe, Lonoke, or Cabot. Gary and Glenn, they are said to be growing marijuana plants actually in their yard. And then also what was suspicious to people was Gary was driving around in a new like 1977 car and a dirt bike, and everyone was speculating about where he was getting this money, which was obviously to them coming from him selling his marijuana that he's growing. But he was suspected. They look into Gary heavily and Glenn, so they're looking into all these people. They're bringing them in for interviews, polygraphs, etc. And sometimes they pass, sometimes they fail. They just kind of give a certification. And we've talked before about polygraphs. It's just a tool. It's not used in court. I myself, I don't put tons of weight on that. If anybody's on certain types of medications or whatever, then that's going to be a misreading or not able to quote unquote read their physiology changes and whatever. Remember Mike, the juvenile, that had the brother Clayton. Well, they go talk to Mike's mom, and she tells the police about a woman named Sharon A. She states this Sharon person knows who killed Abe, quote unquote, but Sharon is a con artist, and Sharon carries a .45 automatic in her purse. So kind of that's what Mike's mom said. And Mike's dad is interviewed as well, but all that information basically comes from Mike's mom. Right, bam, bam, bam. There is a list of individuals. There's like a Daniel F., a Johnny C., Otis B., a Michael C. It looks like he's related to a James C. And then a name pops up, and his name is Ronald G. They actually get his name. He has been involved in some pharmacy items, some some burglaries of actual pharmacies in the area. So they actually are able to get a warrant. They read him his rights. They get a warrant to search his vehicle, and they do confiscate items in his vehicle. They do actually look at him, I will say, for a couple of years, but nothing ever transpires on this suspect, this Ronald. At this same time, like immediately upon this happening, the Beebe PD and then the Arkansas State Police, again, they don't have computer systems. They're trying to get as much coordination out of local law enforcement as they can. So they actually have a meeting with all of the police departments. Little Rock, they go to like all the surrounding places of Beebe. They go to Lonoke County, so all the police departments there, White County, Pulaski County, and even into Saline County, which is south of Pulaski down into like Benton. So we're talking Benton, Bryant area. We're talking Little Rock, North Little Rock, Jacksonville, Cabot, Ward, Lonoke, like there's a place called Carlisle, little town, Carlisle. They're looking at all of these surrounding areas. We're probably talking 100 to 200-mile radius from Beebe, okay? So this is where they're looking. And at that time, the North Little Rock Police Department, they supply the Arkansas State Police with several more names. So they have a Claude M., a Marion R., they have a Neil D. They have a man that's named Troy W. And he is actually, they list him as a preacher, but that also he's practicing quote unquote witchcraft. Evidently, he is also listed as a quote unquote bad egg. That is very 1977 and interesting. Now, he is friends, they listed Wayne W. that is friends with this Troy. Now, Wayne is literally the only bad thing to him, I guess, is that he's friends with Troy, and they state that he is a school teacher, but also an alleged homosexual. Doesn't say anything of why that is any type of necessity to know other than I guess the times. Like, they talk about Troy's alleged witchcraft and then Wayne's alleged sexuality. So, again, 1977 and bias. In Cabot, they do have a man pop up that his name is Bill M. So his name pops up because he knows all the local Cabot dopers, quote unquote, drug dealers. So they interview him. Now, another name pops up in the file that's actually more north of Beebe, even further, like where I live is north of Beebe, but this place is really north of Beebe, but still in White County, the same as Beebe. So a Denny Joe T, his name pops up, and it's because right after this happened, he had been arrested for burglarizing a pharmacy, and evidently he has a friend named Debbie who was also involved in being arrested in a pharmacy burglary in Paragould. Now, Paragould is all the way near Jonesboro. To give you an idea, this would be another 150 miles away from Beebe, maybe. just to kind of give some ideas. This just tells you that they're trying to look at every single person or persons connected to these pharmacy burglaries. And as you can see, there's a lot. We already got a list from North Little Rock. Well, Little Rock gives their list of known criminals. Okay, so they tell the Arkansas State Police about a person named Dwight P., a Michael W., an Albert Jackson W., and then a guy named Mike C., a different Mike C. These are all people, again, they're dealing the drugs, they're in and out. And this Mike C person, he is actually a dealer, like a drug dealer for the Cummins prison. Yes. So he is known to be that. And so they are investigating him as well. In April, we're still, in all of these, I will say, this is, Abe's murder is the 5th, and all of these people, their names are coming about between April and May, like right there. But literally in April, on the 27th, there is another burglary, and it's in this community called Shannon Hills. So it's the Shannon Hills Pharmacy, and it's close to, like, I would say it's in Pulaski County, close to North Little Rock area. So this is where this happened. But the Arkansas State Police, they learn of it, and then right away in this situation, they immediately have 3 suspects for this robbery, which is a Robert R., a Lynn B., and then a Debbie D. These people are all arrested for this Shannon Hills situation. And then, of course, they are doubly looked at for Abe's situation. Now, we mentioned that there was this Mike C. that was dealing drugs out of the Cummins prison. Well, evidently there's another man named Barry who is also in Cummins, but he is there for burglaries in the Beebe Cabot area. And so the police just wanted to go talk to him. Not that they thought that he did it. He was in prison at the time, but they wanted to talk to him because he would know kind of the situation with everyone in that scene. Now, on April 16th of 77, the Arkansas State Police investigator, his name is Howard, Junior Howard. Now, he receives information that there is a known subject going only as Blue. They do not know this person's name, but that he was in the McRae Beebe area during this time frame. His sources were telling him that Blue, this Blue person, was in the possession of several unlabeled bottles of pills of unknown types, and he was attempting to sell them. And then he does get a description of Blue as like a 25-year-old male, white male, 5'10", 175 pounds, dark bushy hair. He has a gold earring in his left ear and some tattoos, possibly on both arms. He wore a blue denim vest and blue jeans and boots, and that was one of the reasons they called him Blue. But it did state that Blue was possibly in Hot Springs, so they are trying to locate this person at this time. Now, in Cabot, a person named Sandy comes forward with information about her parents. So she states that her parents are Harold and Diane, and they actually do own a restaurant, I'm not going to say, and she states that they were kind of a questionable character. Her brother is a character. So she is basically pointing fingers at her whole family. And she states that her brother is a doper and a burglar. He is living in a trailer in Little Rock with a girlfriend and the girlfriend's invalid mother. And she states that he was responsible for a burglary at the Harrison TV store and also the home of Willard Schroeder. Both of these evidently were in Beebe. And then she stated that this Lenny person was also involved in that Harrison TV burglary, but that he had also been responsible for robbing a bank in McRae, like a year before this all happened, so in 76. And she stated that the Lenny and then 2 other guys had evidently murdered 3 men in Texas, and it was all drug related. So this is all coming from Sandy, guys. Now, she also says that another person that popped up into her head that could be responsible is a Jerome person. She had heard that he was responsible for a murder slash burglary, and he was also a quote unquote doper and a very violent person who had beaten his wife on numerous occasions. Evidently, his wife was also involved in drugs, and evidently also his wife is related to Dr. Short. Remember Dr. Short? This is like his stepdaughter. So now we discuss Sandy. So at the same time, there is another quote unquote individual that is a reliable source that is unnamed that also points the finger at the Jerome, again married to Debbie, who is Dr. Short's like stepdaughter. And again, it's all about this Harrison TV burglary that happened in Beebe before Abe's murder. Okay, and in this item, it does state that there were arrests made for that. So there was a Morris Richardson, since they were arrested off state, and a Mark Goodrum. This source also mentions this Lenny person in that they were friends with the guys that burglared the Harrison TV, but that they were also friends. So this is a connection to another case that some of my Cersei people will know. So these people, this Lenny person was a buddy of Barry Kimbrell. I'm going to name his name because he was arrested and he would be convicted of the murder of Mrs. Porter Rogers that happened in Cersei. And there is a book. I'm going to plug this book. It's called Murder in Cersei. I have not covered the Mrs. Porter Rogers case, but this is a very homegrown case in my hometown. So this guy, this Lenny person, was evidently friends with, they're trying to state, okay, these people are all dopers and they're all murderers or burglar, very violent. This unnamed source, reliable source, was saying Jerome was very violent and corroborated what Sandy said about beating Debbie on several occasions. So kind of more fingers pointed at Jerome. Now, in the Ward area, Ward is very close to Beebe, their police department was pointing the fingers at a person that went by Frosty. They kind of thought his first name might be Harold, but he was, quote unquote, a hard drug user. He had evidently smashed out the front window of a place called Fisher's Supply and burglarized the store. That same night, he had smashed out the rear window of a place called Cottage Inn and also burglarized it. He had broken both windows out with a large flashlight battery, so that's what he utilized. And they were looking at him because it was similar MO to the Dotson's drugstore burglary. Now, they also come about from Ward a Johnny N. He's from Macrae. He is a known hard drug user. It states that he mixes his own drugs and chemicals to produce acid. So he's making acid and selling acid. There was another informant that told the Ward officer that the dolphin hydrochlorate, remember that was stolen from the Dotsons, it is specifically used to mix with drugs to produce this acid. So that's why they're looking at this guy, because he has a history of needing that. And also, it states that he was involved with another person, that Frosty person, and another Harry person. His name is Harry. I don't know if he's actually Harry, but they had burglarized Ash Flat drugstore 2 years before. And Ash Flat, if I'm not mistaken, it would be much further north of Beebe, still here in Arkansas. So this Harry person was stated to be a hard drug user like Frosty and Johnny, and of course be into burglarizing drugstores. Now, the file does go on to mention that 3 years before Abe was murdered, he had actually interrupted a burglary happening in Beebe at a Montgomery Ward catalog store. And evidently, it was a big, burly, white male that he was able to apprehend, but this person did get away. So they do mention that about that, and maybe it could be that person they're looking at. someone that maybe came back to get Abe. In May, so all of these leads, as you can see, there are hundreds of leads being produced just in April. But lo and behold, nothing is panning out. The leads are going nowhere. There is a woman who comes forward to talk to Police Chief Jimmy Jackson, and she doesn't want to give her name, but she states that she is aware of a man named Silas V that moved from Beebe to Searcy 3 days after the killing. So she is pointing the finger at him and stating that he was a doper who had previously broken into another drugstore called McFadden's in North Little Rock. And evidently this same man, whenever he did time in Cummins, the prison, he had killed a man while he was there. She did not have any actual evidence or information to link this person, but just said based on his past history, she felt that he needed to be questioned. So she's coming forward with him, and he is questioned, and they do look at that. Now, another woman comes forward. Her name is Carol. She states that a person named Junior and Sid, and I believe we talked about Junior and Sid being brothers, that they had killed Abe. And she stated that these two brothers live in the McRae area and that they had quote unquote threatened to kill her if she shared anything that she knew with the police. But she stated specifically that these brothers did beat her up. Now, on April 26th, this isn't dictated into the file until June, and it's back June 23rd of 1977. So this is 2 months after this all came about. But in April, on the 26th, an actual DEA agent, so the Drug Enforcement Agency, he comes forward to report that he had a confidential informant state that a Gary Evans and a Billy F., both of the Jonesboro area, were reportedly responsible for the burglary and death in the Abe Pipkin case. Now, the informant stated that a man named Terry, a white male who lived in Caraway, Arkansas, was supposed to have picked both of these men up shortly after the crime and carried them to his house. And then he hid them out for a period of time until the heat was off. Now, the Arkansas State Police requested to talk to the informant, who was the Terry, just to see if they could get further information. But it was stated that Terry was currently involved in a narcotics investigation. So at that time, I guess at that time in April, they decided no further action would be taken as far as interviewing Terry. So it was kind of like he was working on a case, he was helping them, they weren't going to talk to him. But they said that what they would try to do was develop a case actually against Terry, which would place him in a position where he would be more likely to tell them the truth concerning this crime, concerning the Abe Pipkin case. Now, on June 20th, so they talked to him in April, or they got information in April, and then in June, they actually do get to interview Terry, and then at that time, he states that he believed that there was zero involvement of Gary Evans or Billy in the crime. And he advised that the last time that he had even seen Gary or Billy was around Christmas of 1976. So he's saying he didn't see them in April 1977. And that his opinion, he hadn't heard of them being responsible. He hadn't heard from them at all. Now remember this situation, okay? Yes. So this all was told and in the police file as of June 1977. Right after this time period of the informant Terry talking, there is another boy that comes about. His name is Freeland. So he's employed at the Harvey's Catfish House in Beebe. Now, he advises that a man named Donald and then a man named Buddy, who incidentally has the last name. Remember, I told you there was a lot of coinciding last names, which I'm not giving you last names of these individuals because they weren't arrested for this crime or anything. But I don't know if this was like a cross contamination of just hearing wrong or whatever. But There's a Donald and a Buddy, and then a Larry, but they have the same last names as that Truman and Larry from before. So that is interesting and kind of hanging out with the same people. But this Freeland, he has a lot of information. He states that he was told that these people broke into the drugstore and they broke out the window utilizing a tire tool. And then he said the two men went inside and one stayed outside as a lookout. And Abe Pipkin drives up, parks it, and this is at Dotson's Pharmacy. He states that Abe drives up, parks his car across the street from their drugstore, and shines a light across the street and sees the broken glass. Abe then gets out of his car and comes across the street. The lookout jumps Abe and then beats him with a tire tool, and apparently like right in front of the store. This person that beat him, which was said to maybe be the Buddy or Larry, he continues to beat Abe while the others get the car and then they pull him off. And this Freeland says that later on he actually sees blood on the Larry person. Now the police talk to a Sharon who collaborates that the Buddy person was involved. So she is saying yes. Now the police, as you can see, the investigators are hunting down all of these names, interviewing these people, and finding out, okay, who, what, where, when, as far as where were you on the night of April 5th. Coming forward in July, okay, this is April, and I'll just tell you, this is sensitive personal information, but this is going to be shared as it does pertain to the investigation. So the police were having to look, obviously, at everybody they could, but they were specifically looking for people in Abe's life. And it is July now. It is time, weeks have passed. Everybody wants answers. Everybody's asking questions. There is a situation where Abe's sister's grandsons they're angry and they're stating that they know who killed Abe, and if the police don't do anything, they're going to take things into their own hands. So tempers are up. People are upset, and the police, the Arkansas State Police, they're working as hard as they can to get answers. Well, in July, on the 15th, Beebe police officer Terry Long, who worked with Abe, he comes forward to investigator J.R. Howard, and J.R. Howard will come up later, probably in part 2. I'll get into that heavily, but he comes about and states that Abe had told him that he had a girlfriend that was in North Little Rock and that he helped her pay her grocery bill. Now, Officer Long stated that Abe had told him that there was a deal worked out with the Kroger store in North Little Rock where Abe would kind of go in and put money on a tab, and then this woman could come in and get groceries. Okay. Officer Long said that Abe never told him who this woman was or where she lived in North Little Rock. That's all he said, but he did say that this woman had a daughter who had actually propositioned him for money, like I guess Abe. Officer Long also said that Abe indicated the woman's daughter was married to a man who was in the penitentiary. So this was kind of what Officer Long was remembering about what Abe had told him about this woman. Officer Long did state that he did see Abe with a woman who drove a white Plymouth that looked very much like an old police car. And he said that he thought that the woman's name was like Price or Pierce. He really didn't know. Officer Long stated that Abe and this woman were seen together approximately 1 week before he was killed. Finding this out, of course, the investigators and with the state police and J.R. Howard, so they're having to look and find this woman, okay, and kind of see what the deal is. Well, lo and behold, they do find this woman. Now, her name is Hazel. She does live in North Little Rock. They find her and they actually interview her. Hazel states that she had met Abe like 4 years ago, meaning sometime around 1973. She met him in North Little Rock. She was working at a coffee house and he came in. She was waitressing. that he just asked her for a date after a couple of times of meeting, that they quote unquote dated off and on for that 4-year period. But actually 2 months before he died, they broke up, and he had told her he wanted to divorce his wife and marry her, but Hazel told him she didn't want to, and he had told her that he had already contacted an attorney and that Flossie had actually agreed to the divorce, but Hazel just didn't believe that they knew anything about her. She didn't think that Abe had ever told Flossie about her specifically, or her name, or anything like that. So, and she did mention that Abe was giving her money. She had asked Abe if he was being blackmailed, so to speak. I don't know in what connection that was or when she asked that, but she just mentioned that. Now, she also mentioned that her son Edward had served a year in Cummins for theft, but he had actually been in prison at the time of Abe's death. So it obviously wasn't him. So basically the officers are able to locate this so-called girlfriend of Abe's and then confirm that she had nothing to do, because at first they were thinking, okay, oh my goodness, did this woman have something to do with Abe's death? And then finding out about her son, which Officer Long had gotten wrong. He thought it was like her daughter, whatever. Anyway, they were able to confirm and follow up and cite that Hazel and her son had nothing to do with his death. I mentioned that. I know that's sensitive. I'll be honest, when I saw there was a mention earlier in the file before I came upon her actual name that said that, and I was like, I mean, he's 71 years old. I was like, no way. And it had actually mentioned that he had like 2 girlfriends, and I'm like, that's absolutely crazy. And then this popped up, and evidently another officer had mentioned that this Hazel person, quote unquote, I guess had several men that were taking care of her. It was in the file, and I say this with deep respect for Abe's family, but it was in the file that Flossie was aware of this, and she had actually told the investigators that Abe had come to her, I want to say a week before, so kind of like what he was saying to Hazel, and asked her about a divorce, but obviously nothing transpired, nothing happened. It was, something that was mentioned, but Flossie did give all this information over to the state police, just FYI, and she was very aware of all of this. Okay, so anyway, I discussed this because obviously this was very pertinent in the file, and something was a big red flag for the investigators, that they had to hunt down these people and make sure that they did not murder Abe, because bottom line is, really don't care what was going on, behind closed doors, but we really want to make sure that these people were not murderers, So the biggest deal here is what happened to Abe. After this happens, we still don't have answers. It's approaching December, and then you get into January, and again, the police have looked into all kinds of leads, talked to hundreds of people. Some names come about in January of 1978. So, an Officer Kennedy, who was with the Beebe Police Department, he comes forward and states that he had an informant tell him that a Mike person of Beebe was a close friend of a Kathy person, and then she had a husband named David, and then they had some friends. These people, Kathy, David, and the friend Norman, are said to have killed Abe. Kathy had divulged to this informant that, I guess the night that, or I guess that, like, Abe got killed, in the morning, but I guess that night she had overheard David and Norman high on drugs and arguing and talking about, it's your fault, blah, blah. She could tell that they were talking about possibly this Abe Pipkins' death, okay? So this situation will be looked at. So this pops up in 1978. There is information in the file all the way into the 80s of Kathy actually trying to work with the Arkansas State Police to get David to confess to Abe's murder. And David confesses to a lot of things, other things. He definitely was no angel, but he never confesses. But she continues to work with the Arkansas State Police, and the Arkansas State Police look into the David Norman suspects very closely. They are riddled throughout this 1,100-page file, okay? In March of 1978, there is another suspect who pops up named Robert, and he has been arrested by the Little Rock Police Department and the North Little Rock Police Department in conjunction with the Arkansas State Police for burglarizing the Sherwood Pharmacy, which is in North Little Rock, okay? So he breaks in, he uses, it states, a wrecking bar and breaks the front glass. He is caught, he is arrested for this, but because of this MO, they look closely at him for Abe's death. So he emerges in March of 1978 as a suspect. So they followed this very closely. So kind of fast forward to 1980, there is a man named Jimmy Wayne R. He is investigated. His name pops up. He is interviewed. This is April of 1980, and he fails his polygraph. But he states that he knew nothing of Abe's death. And Jimmy was a known burglar. He was just a running drugs, burglarizing, but he states that he was in Louisiana at the time, so he is another suspect. Now, also in 1980, an unnamed source comes forward. He is actually mic'd up, so he has a wiretap, and he is helping the state police investigate a person named David and then Sherry, and these are different from the other ones that we mentioned before, but he does get mic'd up. He does talk to them. Nothing comes of it, but they had come about, were known to be stealing, burglarizing pharmacies, kind of doing all things. So they popped up as big suspects, just like David and Norman. So they will be looked at all throughout the 80s along with that. Like I said, you have numerous polygraphs, numerous interviews. You have Abe's whole family livid. Like I said, Abe's sister, her grandson's gonna go vigilante and probably on those brothers I mentioned, because I think that was the big talk in town, that those brothers had done it. They were the culprits. But there are tons of people looked at. We have vehicles being searched. Homes are actually being searched. Just numerous names, but it's like the same names, the same people keep popping up over and over again. And the police are doing everything they can. Nobody's lining up. They are looking at all kinds of states like Kansas, Texas. In the 80s, they're looking at known suspects. They're looking at fingerprints to match up, and just nothing, absolutely nothing is matching up. And unfortunately, this case is getting cold. I mean, it is now in the 80s. It's a cold case. There's no clear answers. The police are chasing down these leads, but they're not leading anywhere good. Now, fast forward. So in 1984, there is a person named Jody that comes forward and actually outlines some familiar names. So it's the Johnny and the Harry that other people have looked at before. And this Jody person states that they are responsible for the Dotson's pharmacy and the beating death of Abe, and that both of these people have been heavy in running and using narcotics in the area, that they had both been incarcerated for disorderly conduct. They had possession of marijuana. They have just been in trouble numerous times. And these people, Johnny and Harry, are both polygraphed, and they do pass, and upon interview, the police do feel that they had nothing to do with Abe's death. So they are ruled out as suspects. Now the police are just wringing their hands over who, what, where on this case, when in April of 1985, a certain infamous person pops up. A certain man, a certain serial killer, quote unquote, going by the name Henry Lee Lucas. Now, Henry Lee Lucas has been arrested down in Texas for murdering 2 women. And as you know, I have a deep dive into the Henry Lee Lucas case. So please go listen to those episodes. It is a very deep dive into him. I will say he was heinous. He caused a lot of pain and agony for many families in what he did, what he actually did, and what he stated he did. And this man had a horrendous childhood. So I do a deep dive into that. Go listen. In April, Henry Lee Lucas is in Texas and he is confessing to murders across the country. He is confessing to hundreds of murders. And in that time frame, he is confessing to some murders in Arkansas. And he confesses to a Pipkins murder. Now, when the state police, so I mentioned investigator, so Arkansas State Police investigator at the time, I believe he was a sergeant at this time, but he was in investigations. I've mentioned him before, J.R. Howard, and he's been on my show. And in fact, he is interviewed in my Henry Lee Lucas episode, so go listen. But he is just an absolute wealth of information, and he had just a luxurious, just long, wonderful career with the Arkansas State Police. He ran the crime lab. He is retired now, but he is just an amazing agent of the law, just amazing. But JR is one of the main investigators on Abe's case, and he actually flies. So he goes down to Texas and he picks up Henry Lee Lucas, and they interview him and all this stuff for not just this case, but other cases as well that Henry Lee Lucas has confessed to. Now, immediately upon interviewing him, and JR told me himself, he knew right away that Henry Lucas did not do this. He did not have the information. He knew some details. He knew it was a robbery and a murder, but he did not have any specific details. He did not know. And it was very clear that he was not responsible. However, the prosecuting attorney at the time, his name is Chris Rath, he does file a complaint against Henry Lucas and tells the press he does plan to prosecute Henry Lucas. However, Lucas, after this time frame, shortly thereafter, Lucas and then his awful partner, Otis Toole, which Otis Toole, again, listen to my episode, but he is in prison in Florida and he will remain there, and he is actually confesses, and the Walsh family agree that he actually murdered Adam Walsh. Just absolutely horrible situation. But Otis and Henry Lucas had equally confessed to all these crimes. Well, they begin to backpedal, and immediately there's a Times article that comes out that kind of shows the inconsistencies with Henry Lee Lucas. So by 85, 86, it's basically pretty much that Henry Lee Lucas is a liar. He didn't really commit these. They think he committed or supposedly committed 600 murders. Well, really, it might just be 2 or 3. Nobody knows. This man's a liar. So ultimately, he is not prosecuted. And ultimately, the Arkansas State Police and the prosecutor, Rath, they are told in December of 1985 that Henry Lee Lucas's ex-wife, Betty Crawford, so she is interviewed, and she confirms that Lucas was not traveling much in the time frame because he was married to her between 1975 and 1977, and he was with her most of those times. And she said that it was documented. There was work receipts, and the only time he was away from her was maybe a day trip to New Jersey or whatever. I believe at that time he was actually living, I want to say, in Maryland at that time. But again, she documents in interviews that there was no way for Henry Lee Lucas to be in Arkansas committing that murder in April of 77. Again, listen to my deep dive on that. It is very interesting, and JR talks about they did actually interview Henry Lee Lucas extensively for other cases, of course, and he was definitely in Arkansas at times. There was a story that JR told me that made it very clear that Henry was recalling actual facts. Now, Is Henry Lee Lucas a big liar? Did he murder Abe? Absolutely not. But this was just a horrific thing that, the police had to chase down. They had to know, was Henry Lee Lucas responsible? I mean, he definitely was a heinous person, but in this case, yeah, not so much on Abe's case, sadly. Now, after the situation with Henry Lee in 1985, Abe's case is very cold by this time. There's just not any new leads going on. Again, it's same old names, same old stories. Nothing is happening. And this is where I'm going to have to leave you guys in part one. Now, stay tuned. In part two, we're going to pick up, rapidly move into the year 1993, where there's big movement in the case. Okay, so stay tuned. Go back. You have lots to listen to with this case in 133 other episodes, but definitely if you have not listened to my Henry Lucas episodes, go listen. Thank you guys for being with me, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Love them.